No fanfare? Okay, that was delayed, but whatever. So, finally here, Metroid Prime 3. This one was the return to form for many people. All the people who didn't like Metroid Prime 2. Thing is, I haven't played this game since I originally played it like over a decade ago. I've only played this game once, and back then I kind of agreed with people that this one was the second best one in the trilogy. Thing is, why haven't I played it then? Well, only one way to find out is go and play the game. I gotta go play in the system now. Alright. Again? Really? Metroid Prime 3, people. So after Metroid Prime 2, Retro Studios was getting a bit sick of Metroid. I'm guessing the crunch of getting the first game released followed by their ambitions of doing something different for the second game getting killed, they didn't really want to make a third game in the same style. Initially, the staff at Retro Studios asked Nintendo to either do a Donkey Kong Country revival, considering that Rare was now a part of Microsoft, or a Zelda spin-off game based around the Sheikah. That Sheikah spin-off idea would never see the light of day, though Nintendo did end up letting Retro Studios make 2 Donkey Kong Country games, so it all worked out in the end. However, Nintendo demanded a third Metroid Prime game first, and Iwata would ask them to make it for the upcoming Nintendo Wii. Though Retro Studios agreed, they still tried to pick something different than the traditional Metroid Prime formula, but this time instead of a multiplayer-focused Metroid game, it would be an open-world, mission-based game centered around Samus doing actual bounty hunter work. I don't know how the Phase-Long storyline would fit into that, but regardless, Nintendo quickly shut it down because the pitch also included the idea that Samus would actually get paid for her work, and that would be how players got upgrades instead of finding them in the world. And someone at Nintendo thought that was out of character for Samus because she does bounty work out of the kindness of her heart. I'm sure Samus is a great person. With all the bullshit she puts up with to save the universe, she certainly does care, but how does she eat? How does she pay for her ship? Does Federation provide all that? If Federation provides it all, then she's not a bounty hunter, she's just a Federation employee. Plus, in the Famicom game, she actually gets paid for her work, so someone's just fucking wrong. So yeah, that got rejected, and once again, Retro Studios ended up making a Metroid Prime game like the previous games. As you can see in the footage, the game looks like Metroid Prime 1 and 2 in terms of setup. Getting to the story, things are taking place 6 months after Metroid Prime 2, and begin with Samus waking up from a nightmare about Dark Samus. She doesn't really take time to reflect on that though, as she arrives at the GFS Olympus shortly after. Once boarded upon the spacecraft, she makes her way through security, including weapons calibrations because shooting the doors to make them open is canon in the Metroid universe, which is just an accident waiting to happen. You see, Samus is here for one reason. Admiral Dame has hired Samus and a few other bounty hunters to address the fact that the Federation's Aurora system has been brought down by a space pirate virus. Considering the fact that Aurora units are basically a bunch of mother brains, I'm surprised the Federation didn't have greater security, or even consider scrapping the system altogether after the original Metroid. Anyway, Samus arrives at the briefing room just in time to receive orders from Admiral Dame.
Andreda, enough.
You bitch! Anyway, Admiral Dame tells Samus and the other bounty hunters everything I just explained, and the other bounty hunters here are Rundus, who has ice powers, Gore, who is a robot, and Gandrea, who is a shapeshifter. It's the task of these bounty hunters to take the vaccine the Federation developed and use it to cure all the Aurora units of the space pirate virus before the weakened Federation is attacked. Then suddenly an attack happens, and behold, is Covenant beginning to board the station, bursting through the walls with attack pods and all that. The reason for the attack being unclear, as it's up to Master Chief to clear out all the alien scum. Wait a minute. That's right, I'm reviewing this one. Samus and the other bounty hunters all escape the GFS Olympus and head back to their ships. They are then given the order to help defend the planet Noya nearby, which is the actual target of the space pirate attack. Upon landing, Samus then finds out the planetary defense system is now offline due to the pirates, and Amiga is now heading towards the planet.
Hey, Hey, I've seen this one. I've seen this one. This is a classic.
There are 3 other generators get back online to bring back up the defense system, but the other bounty hunters go ahead and take care of one of them for her. Along the way, Samus is helped by Rundus, while also witnessing Federation troopers using the new PED systems. That is, Phase-Long Enhancement Device. These PED systems allow them to use Phase-Long as powerful new weapons that blast away space pirates like nothing. Gundrea helps clear out some space pirates at the final generator, leaving Samus to actually get it online herself. However, once she does, she's attacked by Mega Wrigley, who started harassing her a bit before she got here. The Mega Wrigley boss fight here is pretty awesome, with the spectacle of falling down the shaft, though it can feel a little disorienting at times too. Ultimately, Samus wins the fight and Rundus helps her out again by pulling her out of the pit. With all the generators back online, the hunters regroup and make their way to activate the defense system. However, when they arrive, suddenly Dark Samus appears and wipes the floor with all of them. Now, kind of like how I forgot to show the 100% ending to Prime 1 in that video, ultimately I didn't show the 100% ending to Prime 2 in that video either, which showed that Dark Samus managed to escape Dark Aether before it collapsed. And just like throughout Prime 2, she reanimated from Phase-On particles, so it's not a major surprise that she is here, and it must be a major oh shit moment for Samus considering her nightmares of late. Despite Dark Samus taking out the hunters before leaving, Samus retains consciousness long enough to blow the meteor away with the defense system, then finally passes out. A few more months pass and Samus wakes up from a coma on the GFS Olympus. She is then informed that Dark Samus had somehow infected her and the other hunters to make them stop producing Phase-On. Due to this, the Federation kid them all out with their PED technology, including giving Samus the new PED suit. Which, this may be one of the ugliest suits in the series next to the Fusion Varia suit. I'll get into its better qualities later though. After testing out the suit, Samus makes her Aurora Unit 242, where she then learns that the other bounty hunters woke from their comas a lot sooner than her and were dispatched to deal with Phase-On threats. Noyan wasn't the only planet targeted by a meteor now known as a Leviathan seed, as 3 other planets were recently hit by them. However, much to the Federation's dismay, the other bounty hunters would go MIA, leaving it up to Samus to finish the job. Samus then heads out for Brio, and the adventure begins. Yeah, Metroid Prime 3 has some notorious disc read issues. Apparently it's a thing with dual layer DVDs on the Nintendo Wii, particularly first models that still have GameCube support. Yeah, so let me take care of this real quick. There we go. Why does that keep playing every time I sit down? Whatever. Overall, gameplay is similar to the first 2 Prime games, though things did get overhauled. Samus no longer relies on tank control since we have moved from the GameCube controller over to the Wii remote. Wherever you point is where Samus aims. However, unlike Metroid Prime Hunters, the lock-on still returns to help with lining up shocks, and you can even turn on auto-aim if you like keep things like the first 2 Prime games. I honestly keep it set to what the game calls free aim though. I think it works well and gives you more flexibility when fighting to aim where you want. Also, free aim is forced on you during boss fights, so it's probably better to just get used to it. Dodging attacks is still a massive part of the gameplay, and overall this is a great balance between dodging and having to aim. With the PED suit, Samus now has access to Hyper Mode at all times with a simple press of a button. Just like when fighting Metroid Prime in the first game, Hyper Mode gives you access to the Hyper Beam, which absolutely rapes enemies. Yeah, it costs an energy tank to use, but you'll most likely get that health back after fighting, so that doesn't mean much. Metroid Prime 3 is one of the easiest games in the series, and while I did die twice, making this the most deaths I had in the console trilogy for recording these videos, those 2 deaths came from me misunderstanding what was going on rather than the game actually beating me. To make things even easier, Metroid Prime 3 ditches the open-ended nature of the first 2 games for a more streamlined design akin to Metroid Fusion. The hint system basically can't be turned off as you'll always have an Aurora unit tell you what you need to do next. Each planet is the equivalent of an area in one of the first 2 Prime games. That makes sense as you can't really have each of these planets be the same size as Talon 4 or Aether without bloating the game out to a ridiculous degree. The planets I feel are overall weaker though than the areas in the last two games. Remember how in the Prime 2 video I said areas were condensed down into a few mini areas connected with hallways? Well, Prime 3 boils areas down even further, as each planet you explore has only a handful of mini areas that are usually not even connected with hallways. Over the course of the game, you explore Brio, which has a jungle-like area, a fire area, and a very small ice area, Elysia, which only has Sky Town, and Skytown feels like what the Sanctuary Fortress would have been if it was as dull and lame as the rest of Prime 2's areas. Did the dev teams mix up notes? Then finally, you have the Space Pirate Homeworld, a high-tech military complex meant for space pirate things. You can also revisit Noyan for collecting additional items. Boss fights are a bit reduced compared to Prime 2, but there are still some good ones. Each Leviathan has a boss fight inside, and these are some pretty fun fights, though not as memorable as Prime 2 or even Prime 1. Outside of that, there are really only a handful of bosses, and the game is similar to Prime 1 in relying on mini bosses to pick up the slack. Puzzles are a bit mixed. You have a good chunk again of them just being activating a switch with an item like in Prime 1 or the puzzles that rely on Dark Aether in Prime 2. Then you have a few that will make you think, but nothing compared to some of the better puzzles in Prime 2. The boosting Spiral Ball can be used together once again, however I feel this game is the weakest for the Spiral Ball since you get it so late in the game it doesn't have much time to shine. And that's saying a hell of a lot because you didn't get the Spiral Ball until 2/3 of the way into Prime 2, but here it's one of the last items you get. Speaking of getting it, this game also copies the whole go to the last area thing Prime 2 did. When exploring Elysia, there's a point where you have to go back to Brio for the screw attack, then later when you're exploring the pirate homeworld, you have to go back to Elysia for the spider ball. Though at least this time you're told rather quickly this is the case, so you don't wander around like a moron not knowing where to go. When it comes to items, only a handful return from the last two games. From the start, Samus has the Various suit, which is just cosmetic again. Then she also retains the Charge Beam, Morph Ball Bombs this time, and even the Space Jump. So Retro Studios finally caved to all the Space Jump addicts out there. I wasn't playing Metroid Prime 3 back when it came out. I didn't even know what a Metroid was. Clearly, you guys have the problem. Returning items you'll find include missiles, the boosting Spiral Ball, secret missiles which seem a little more reliable this time though just as useless, the screw attack, and the grapple beam. To start with the new items, Metroid Prime 3 introduces ship items. First is ship missiles, which you can also collect ammo expansions for. Sadly, those ship missiles are kind of useless. Besides blowing up things for story progression, I can't think of any situations you can really use it. There is this one area where you can use it to blow up enemies, but that is after a sequence where you blow up something mandatory for progression. And later you can't use the ship in the same room. The ship also gets its own grapple beam, which once again is only useful for mandatory set pieces required for progression. This game also does beam and visors differently from the last two games as well. Returned from Prime 1 is the plasma beam, however instead of being a separate weapon, it now just stacks on top of the power beam, which also means it keeps the fast firing, right? It also keeps its nerfs, being similar to the Prime 2 light beam in terms of damage and how quickly it can light things on fire. Another page taken from Metroid Fusion is instead of getting the ice beam, you get ice missiles. It makes sense because we don't have an option to not have the burning effect of the plasma beam, though I feel like ice missiles are a bit less snappy to use. In Prime 1 with the ice beam and Prime 2 with the dark beam, a full charge shot throws an enemy on contact, then a missile would shatter them. In Prime 3 a missile freezes, then it takes a full charge shot to shatter them. It fundamentally is the same thing, just in reverse order, but I don't know, it feels a bit more clunky and I'd honestly rather just spend 2 missiles for snappier kills, but that isn't an option. Later in the game you also get the new Nova Beam, which besides increasing your damage a bit more, can also pierce like the 2D Plasma Beam, it's even green to boot. Pairing it with the X-Ray Visor allows you to instantly kill a lot of enemies, or use it to activate switches behind phase-on plating. And yes, the X-Ray Visor returns from Prime 1 as well, though it's the only visor Samus collects this time around. I guess to make up for that, it has a few more uses than it did in Prime 1. Not only is it paired with the Nova Beam, but it can also be used to activate special switches, and it still lets you see through walls. Also, its visibility isn't piss poor this time either. There are no suit upgrades in this game either. Once the PED suit replaces the Varia suit, that's all you get. You do get the hazard shields in the Space Pirate homeworld to protect from the acid rain, but besides turning Samus's shoulder pads purple, it doesn't do anything to change the PED suit's look. Kind of like how the gravity booster had a minimal impact on the dark suit in Prime 2, the purple shoulder pads doesn't do much. There are no longer beam combos or power bombs, instead those are replaced somewhat by the new hyper mode items. Instead of power bombs we get the hyper ball, which honestly kind of sucks. Creates big area phase on electricity, but doesn't compare to what power bombs used to do in the last two games, nor does it compare to the damage the hyper beam can already do. Same goes for hyper missiles, which replace the super missile. While each hyper missile only requires one missile, it takes an absurd amount of phazon energy and does less damage than the hyper beam too. So what's the point of these power-ups? This game also has additional grapple beam items, the grapple lasso, grapple voltage, and the hyper grapple. The grapple lasso allows you to pull objects around with the grapple beam or just rip them off things. The grapple voltage and hyper grapple basically do the same thing. The grapple voltage allows you to drain or add energy to switches and enemies, while the hyper grapple does the same thing, just in hyper mode with phazon energy. Much like aiming the arm cannon, the grapple beam uses motion controls, though unlike aiming and shooting, I find the grapple beam to be a complete pain in the ass. Since it uses the nunchuck, the grapple beam is overall less accurate to use because the nunchuck is less accurate than the Wii remote in terms of sensing motion. And to get into that now, the game has a lot of motion controls. It was an early Nintendo Wii title, so you'll be shaking and twisting and turning and flicking and waggling and pointing and twisting and waggling and pointing and twisting and... Okay, I think you get the point. There are a lot of switches that require motion controls. It could be twisting a switch, pumping up whatever this is. It could be twisting the arm cannon to align a switch, and so on. During boss fights and select sequences, your aiming capabilities with the Wii remote will also be put to the test. Also, the game will make sure the grapple beam is not useless this time around, as you'll be constantly using the nunchuck to pull things around, and the grapple icon even conveniently appears on enemies that you have to use hyper mode on. Even when they try to force the grapple beam down your throat, there are still alternatives to make it useless in some regard. Some things never change. But yeah, using the grapple beam in combat with the nunchuck just being worse than Wii remote, playing sucks, and thankfully hyper mode allows you to ignore the need for it most of the time, which sadly also means more reason to abuse it and make the game even easier. While playing, I slowly realized why I haven't played this game in so long. The game's just extremely easy, and if you don't use hyper mode, it's dragged out. Not only do you have the grapple beam enemies, but there are also enemies that enter hyper mode themselves, basically requiring you to use hyper mode unless you want to spend forever trying to kill them. The game always wants you to be in hyper mode, and while at first you only get one energy tank of phazon at a time, with an auto vent kicking you out of hyper mode if you stay in it for too long, not even a third of the way into the game, Samus will encounter problems with the PED suit, where it's unable to manage her phazon production. What this means is after this point, staying in hyper mode will cause an overload that will start to refill your phazon gauge. Now the game tries to make this seem like a bad thing and encourages you to empty out the tank as fast as you can whenever you encounter this, as failure to will result in a game over as Samus even transforms into another Dark Samus due to corruption. However, the rate the meter fills doesn't accelerate at any point, so what this actually means is that as long as you keep a steady pace while shooting, which while you're in hyper mode if you're not shooting at something, then you'll never be at a risk for corruption, which means congrats, the game just prolonged your time in hyper mode, and once the fight is over you can spam fire return to normal. Yes, this does take more health than using hyper mode normally, as the overload pulls from your health to fill the gauge, but again, enemies drop health restores, and at the rate you can mow down enemies with the hyper beam and how easy energy tanks are to fight in this game, does that even matter? While the areas are not as dull as Prime 2, combat can be outside of boss fights, and the over-reliance on hyper mode, as well as many great items from the first two Prime games not returning, makes the game overall less interesting. It is a great starting point for newcomers to the series, but I think there's little for veterans to enjoy. I don't like the hyper mode items because the hyper beam outclasses them, the ship upgrades are not useful, I don't like the look of the PED suit until late in the game when Samus is nearly fully corrupted by the phazon growing inside her. The items don't feel as useful as they did in the last two games or Metroidvanias in general. To go back to the story for a moment, on each planet Samus will find one of the other bounty hunters now corrupted by Dark Samus. Eventually into a boss fight with each of them in which Samus leaves the opposing hunter so weak Dark Samus is able to easily kill them by absorbing their essence, I guess? In this game, Dark Samus also doesn't have the same presence as Prime 2. Outside of the opening and her ghostly spirit appearing to kill a hunter, she really doesn't show up very often. To continue on though, each time Samus defeats a boss inside the Leviathan Siege, she will also have the phase on corruption inside her grow, even make her vomit at first. This seeming poisoning of Phazon though has no effect on gameplay as she doesn't really get any stronger as the Phazon takes root in her, nor does it make her any weaker either. I think how shit the hyper mode upgrades are kind of shot that intention in the ass, but maybe that wasn't meant to be an aspect of it either. Throughout the entire game, Samus, like the first two Prime games, is a total mute. So outside of her suit glowing, her eyes becoming corrupted in her reflection, the growing corruption has no impact, and spoiler, she ends up fine in the end anyway. Once Samus destroys the Leviathan Siege on all three planets, the Federation is able to figure out the source of all phase on the planet Phase. However, it's too far away to be accessed by normal means. Thankfully for them, the space pirates, I'm assuming with Dark Samus' help, because how did they pull this off otherwise, have a spaceship they've formed out of the Leviathan Sea and is capable of warping. However, in order to gain control of the ship, Samus needs to find the access codes, which are conveniently on the GFS Valhalla, an abandoned ship that was destroyed in a space pirate attack. In order to explore the Valhalla, Samus will need to collect energy cells, of which there are 9. And yes, these are the next iteration of the Chozo artifacts and Sky Temple keys. But unlike those, you don't need all of them to find the code, you only need 5, which unlike the Sky Temple keys, you can collect them along your way and are even required to pick up a few, so you'll likely already have 5 by the time you reach the end game. If you want 100%, you'll need all 9, and that will net you some additional item expansions on the Valhalla, but this is the endgame key hunt done right. Hopefully Prime 4 doesn't fuck it up. Once you get the code, Samus and the Federation use a wormhole to go to Phase, however it's only Samus that's able to land on the planet. Upon landing, Samus instantly overloads with Phazon and the PED suit enters a special vent mode. Basically what this means is that for the rest of the game, Samus is stuck in hyper mode as the ball slowly fills and she'll die of corruption if it fills completely. Phase is honestly a pretty fucking cool final area. It's twisted, it's full of Metroids, and even new types of Phazon like Black Phazon. It will require you to use all your Phazon upgrades until you eventually reach the final room of the game where Dark Samus awakes. This fight feels like a natural evolution from her Prime 2 encounters. Those were Dark Samus fights 1 through 3, and while she takes some attacks from those fights, this feels mostly like Dark Samus 4. And this is when I realized how useless the Hyper Missiles were, as they do less damage, and I actually died to corruption during this fight, and when I used the Hyper Beam in the rematch, it was no problem. After defeating her for the 4th time, Dark Samus isn't done yet though, as she merges with the Aurora unit from the GFS Valhalla that the Space Pirates stole during their raid. And the final boss of the original Metroid Prime trilogy ends up just being a mother brain-like creature. I honestly didn't see that coming. This fight's kind of lame though compared to Metroid Prime or the Emperor Ring. Hell, even Dark Samus 3 at the end of Prime 2. Though that may be because you're stuck in a permanent hyper mode, it makes it easy to just blast away. While taking damage fills up your corruption meter, it doesn't do so super fast. Samus finally defeats it, and Dark Samus I guess rigged it to the core of Phase, as once it's destroyed, all Phazon in the universe begins to fade. Samus is cured of her Phazon corruption, and Phase itself eventually explodes due to becoming unstable. Dark Samus fades from existence, being gone once and for all. Then the Federation books it to escape. While the drama is playing up on if Samus has escaped, we know there's still the entire 2D series after this, and yeah, Prime 4 too, so of course she escapes off screen because cutscene technology is that badass. For those that got 75% of the item, Samus reflects on the other bounty hunters on Elysia, probably taking a break there just because it's a former Chozo planet. I gotta say, this is pretty fucking unearned. I don't feel bad about the hunters dying, why should Samus? I mean, Rundus I kind of feel bad for. He helped Samus multiple times, then not only does Dark Samus absorb his Essex, but she makes him kill himself with his ice powers before doing so. That is pretty fucked up. Gore does absolutely nothing until he's corrupted, then he's just a total dick for like a collective 30 seconds of screen time before he gets killed. Then Gadrea, outside of her mimicking Samus in the opening and right again before she dies, she also does nothing. I mean, I guess she occasionally flirts with Samus, but is giving her a nickname really flirting? Anyway, if you got 100%, Samus is shown flying off to her next adventure. But then Salix's ship shows up and follows her, which people didn't know back then, but I think it's basically confirmed this is Salix stalking Samus now. Also, I gotta say, this is probably the best Samus looks outside of a Super Smash Bros. Game. I really like this model. It looks a lot better than, other M. I really need to stop mentioning that in these videos. And it looks a lot better than she did in Prime 1 and 2. Metroid Prime 3, I think I have to say is the weakest game in the trilogy. It has great graphics for a Wii game and the music is once again great. This time having some orchestra and choir mixed into the Prime musical style. But while the areas are not boring, the gameplay kind of is. There's no exploration outside of the endgame for 100%, items are useless compared to Hyper Mode, and the game is lacking in challenge. If you haven't played a Metroid Prime game, then I'd totally recommend this to get you used to what the trilogy has to offer before diving into the more challenging GameCube titles. But if you're someone who has played a lot of Prime 1 and 2, I don't see why you'd play this one over them unless you really wanted something different and don't mind the lack of challenge or interesting things going on. I mentioned it before, but there was also the Metroid Prime Trilogy released after this. If you want to play Prime 2 without tank controls or want the same with Prime 1 without needing to get the remastered version, then you get this version of the games. Prime 3 is mostly unchanged, only censoring Admiral Dame saying damn and removing a cruel but totally made up tease that Metroid Dread was almost finished. Hey, cut them some slack, they're only 14 years off. If you want all 3 Prime games in one package, this disc is a great pickup. It will also certainly help anyone looking to get ready for Prime 4 by playing through the first 3 games. So, Metroid Prime 3 may be the weakest of the trilogy, but it's a great starting point and it's still a good game for the Nintendo Wii. You know, we wouldn't have a mediocre Metroid game, not counting Prime Hunter single player, until Metroid Other M, which was way blown out of proportion, even though that is kind of a really bad Metroid game, but yeah, the entire Prime trilogy is good, and you know, there's a game for everyone. There's the easy one, the challenging one, and the one for the die-hard Metroid fans. I probably angered some people saying Prime 1 was for the true fans or whatever, but the point aside is, these are fantastic games that anyone should go ahead and give a shot. If you haven't, then what are you waiting for? There's plenty of ways to play them. And, you know, Metroid Prime Remastered, I heard sold decently well for a remaster of the original Prime game, so go ahead and play that. It's available on Switch 2 and Switch 1, you know, all that. I'm kind of rambling now, so we'll get back to Metroid when Prime 4 releases later this year, but until then, I have 2 more retrospects of... I really misspoke there. I'm not redoing this, but I got 2 more retrospects. I got 2 more marathons planned. And, you know, we'll get to those in time. I have a few games I want to look at before the next retrospective. There we go, I got it! This is going on too long, this outro, but, you know, I have a few games I want to get off my backlog that I'm going to go ahead and get into. Donkey Kong's coming up, and that game's looking phenomenal. At the time of recording this, the Direct just came out, so I'm definitely going to review that game, and we'll see what else I can squeeze in. Until then, have a good night and go play some Metroid.